The surface area of Mars is exactly as large as the land area of the Earth. A thorough reconnaissance will clearly occupy us for centuries, but there will be a time when Mars is all explored. A time after robot aircraft have mapped it from aloft. A time after rovers have combed the surface. A time after samples have been returned safely to Earth. A time after human beings have walked the sands of Mars. What then? What shall we do with Mars? There are so many examples of human misuse of Earth that even phrasing this question chills me. If there is life on Mars, I believe we should do nothing with Mars. Mars then belongs to the Martians, even if the Martians are only microbes. The existence of an independent biology on a nearby planet is a treasure beyond assessing, and the preservation of that life must, I think, supersede any other possible use of Mars. Hello. This video is not against the exploration of Mars, and I'm not even against the colonization of Mars if we ensure that the colonization doesn't come at the expense of Mars's potential biosphere. If anything, I suppose the thesis of this video is that we're not ready for the consequences of Mars. I've begun to delve into the why of planetary exploration, and my role in it as a physics PhD student, particularly working in planetary sciences now. Part of me agrees with the Sagan quote at the beginning. That quote also clashes with our modern reality. Essentially, at this point, space exploration has become a political and business-oriented game, which is another way of saying that we're not ready for Mars for that reason. What would happen if we ended up accidentally destroying the life that we don't even know if it exists yet on Mars, through contamination of the environment due to manned emissions? Historically, on Earth, colonization has seen the destruction of ecosystems, cultures, and I'd like to address a core question that I don't see asked very much is, can we ethically justify the exploration of Mars if it could potentially destroy a second origin of life, if we're not incredibly careful and diligent in our science? And I have full faith on the scientific process, but unfortunately, historically as well, that we have seen science pushed by outside sources, which has made missions fail. And political pressure can lead to irreversible consequences even within science. You might recall the Space Shuttle Challenger, where it was found that higher-ups at NASA and Morton Thiokol, the contractor that created the solid rocket boosters for the Challenger spacecraft, they overrode the warnings from the engineers about the O-ring limitations, which eventually led to the explosion of the Challenger. Doing science, especially science that's on the frontier for political points, is very reckless and immensely dangerous, not only to the astronauts that will be on these missions, but to the potential life that will be outside of Earth. So recently I've been reading a book called The Secret Life of the Universe. It's made by a French astrobiologist. I think she works at the SETI Institute now. Her name is Nathalie Cabrol. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry if that's wrong. But Nathalie Cabrol, this is the book. I have it on Kindle. I didn't buy the physical copy because I don't have that much money. But I got it on Kindle, so it's a great book. Her book has pretty much been the cause of my existential crisis a little bit over Mars and humanity's search for life. It's a fantastic book. It goes over modern astrobiology knowledge. I think it was released in 2024. And so like everything astrobiology that we have learned it's really recent. It's incredibly recent. And I feel like I haven't had a source of knowledge on astrobiology this comprehensive in a long time. So it's really nice to have. It's incredibly enlightening to what modern astrobiologists on the frontier see is where life can survive now. And like obviously you have Mars, potentially Europa and Enceladus and then Titan, but there's a chapter on Pluto potentially having life on it too, and it gives really compelling examples and evidence from the New Horizons mission. It's definitely worth the read if you're interested in astrobiology. For this video, a part in the book, which I'll just read, maybe I'll put it like the text, maybe I'll do black screen, I don't know. When thinking about life on Mars, there are two possibilities. It either emerged or it didn't. Proving that it did not exist will be more difficult. We need to think hard about what critical exploration steps we must complete before concluding that we must stop searching. We have just embarked on that journey, so the time is not now. But there is a deadline looming over the horizon that will have profound repercussions on our search regardless of whether life was ever on Mars or not. This deadline is set by the arrival of the first humans on the Red Planet, whenever this may be. Once we set foot on Mars, it will only be a matter of time before the planet becomes contaminated. So to better understand the concerns that I've been having with predominantly what Nathalie's book kind of fueled in me, I suppose, is I started looking into how NASA will be handling the problem of planetary contamination. Actually, last year, in November, I think, I might say it here, December. In December, they published their most recent NASA Planetary Protection Handbook. In it, it's about 124 pages. I read through pretty much all of it, besides like some of the more detailed protocols for like decontaminating spacecraft. I'll go over some of the main, like the key parts of how NASA approaches planetary protection. To preface this a little bit, there's forward contamination, which is when we send spacecraft or people to Mars, and then the life on Earth contaminates the potential life on Mars. And then there's backward contamination, which you could probably guess is when we take samples on Mars and then we contaminate life on Earth in some way. So they picked a specific type of spore that is capable of surviving the transit to and from Mars. So a key part in this handbook is that it states that planetary protection must be flexible as NASA considers challenging missions like crewed missions to Mars. The existing prescriptive robotic requirements of a static bioburden density is not implementable with the added complexity of dynamic microbial sources, i.e. your body, so alternative approaches are needed to prevent harmful contamination. This is NASA just saying, this is NASA, ESA, and COSPAR saying that all of this handbook does not apply to people. We need a whole new thing. We need a whole new handbook, a whole new set of protocols to be able to understand planetary contamination from people. I'm editing this video right now, and one thing I forgot to mention is that all of the stuff that I've been talking about is for NASA and ESA, and even the Chinese government, their space agency, acknowledges planetary protection. And obviously, it's not just government agencies that are involved in space exploration, it also involves the private sector. Of course, one of the big companies for planetary science currently is SpaceX. So if you type in SpaceX planetary protection, you get this just AI stuff that generates. SpaceX doesn't have any public information regarding how they handle planetary protection. All Google says is that they abide by it, but there's nothing publicly that I can find. I don't even know where this AI is getting this information from. There's nothing directly from SpaceX that I can tell. I'm not sure why SpaceX wouldn't make their protocols for preventing contamination on Mars public. That's weird to me, and I can't find information on why. So it's kind of lame. Back to the non-editing version of me. So it also goes on to state different categories of how we define how many spores, also known as the bioburden, that spacecraft and landers and orbiters need to have in order to be essentially approved to be able to do what they say they're going to do. Like, there's even protocols for if you're going to use a gravitational assist around some planet or a moon or something, that you need to have a certain bioburden, maximum number of spores on your spacecraft to be able to do that, to prevent the risk of contamination. So I think one of the final key things that I really want to look at in this handbook, so for Mars specifically, they define special regions. And most of Mars is not a special region. In fact, there's only a few select special regions around the poles and where they believe that lake beds existed on Mars. So these special regions put certain limitations on the bioburden that spacecraft, or specifically that landers and rovers on Mars in those regions can have. What they say is that if a non-nominal condition, such as a hard landing, could cause a high probability of inadvertent biological contamination of the special region by the spacecraft, the entire landed system must be sterilized to a surfaced bioburden of less than or equal to 30 spores. And that's just an enormously small amount of spores. And it's really hard to do that, but it's incredibly important that we put in as much effort to preventing contamination as we can. Because if we contaminate it, there's really no way to undo that problem. Like, once you decontaminate your spacecraft, right, while it's still on Earth, you have to remove the dead bodies of the microbes that are on the spacecraft. If you're on Mars and you're trying to make detections of life and there's dead bodies all over your rover, those little bodies of those dead microbes get into your sample, you're going to make false positive detections, and you're going to think that the same microbes that are in NASA's facilities are somehow dead in the soil on Mars because you detected their carcasses. Contamination would make science hard and could potentially make it impossible to do. I also read, it's kind of getting washed out, Planetary Protection Knowledge Gap Closure Enabling Crewed Missions to Mars. This is in correspondence with NASA, ESA, and COSPAR. They've had meetings since 2015, I think once or twice a year since 2015, in which they discussed specifically understanding planetary protection for crewed missions. And all of that is compiled in this paper. And I don't want to go on every single point in here, but the point is that we're not ready. I'll just make a brief list of all the things that we still need to research. We need to have these things down before we start going and sending people to Mars. There's a lot that we don't know, and we should not be going because it is dangerous to people and to Martians if they live there. So we cannot be going yet. We should go someday, but not yet. So I wanted to go over a lecture from 2019 of the Mars Society. Specifically, I want to focus on what Robert Zubrin is saying. It's kind of scary how reckless this man is in planetary protection. He wants to outright get rid of it because he thinks it is a bureaucratic burden. And while I haven't finished reading his book, I read the part on the planetary protection section, which most of what he says in this video is what he says in the book regarding planetary protection. So if that's all you care about, then maybe don't buy the book.
The book does have a whole section in it on why the planetary protection program needs to be shut down. Okay, to be clear, as Dale Scran said in his introduction, if the planetary protection program exists, human missions to Mars are impossible.
Okay, so already that's not true because NASA, ESA, and COSPAR. I know this is published 5 years after this debate, or yeah, I guess it's called a debate, but no one is opposing him really, so it's not really a debate. But anyways, that is not currently the case because they are trying to figure out what to do with getting people to Mars safely. No one is saying that we can't do it because of this. So.
Because you cannot guarantee that the spacecraft won't crash, in which case if there are people in it, they will scatter microbes. You're filled with microbes. Half of you is microbes, okay? All over the landscape, and that's it, okay? So there's no human exploration of Mars if there is planetary protection.
From what I said earlier, there are protocols that if there's a good chance, which normally there is, of crashing in a special region, then you need to have a certain spore count. So it's not necessarily that you can't go if there's a chance that you're going to crash. It's that you can't do it if you are going to crash in a special region and you have to meet those requirements of bioburden.
Protection program is already damaging the robotic Mars exploration program. The Curiosity rover was prevented from examining some promising areas where there were suspected water seeps because of planetary protection protocols. The Mars sample return mission has been made much more complicated than it needs to be because of planetary protection protocols. The Curiosity landing system, which can land a ton on Mars, that is sufficient to land on Mars a two-stage Mars ascent vehicle, fully fueled with a capsule on top and an MER-sized rover that could go out, get samples, put it in the capsule, and shoot the spacecraft directly back to Earth and do a direct entry and land in Utah and then have the samples distributed to scientists. But instead, the chain of contact with the surface must be broken, and now there has to be a second spacecraft in Mars orbit, and we have to develop autonomous rendezvous and dock. And then there's some people that say that even that spacecraft can't come back to Earth. They want to send it to the lunar orbit toll booth and put it there, which defeats the whole purpose of sample return, because the purpose of sample return is to have the sample being examined by 1,000 different professors at different universities that are specialists in all sorts of areas, as opposed to 4 astronauts who are not trained in the area using a limited set of equipment on a space station.
Okay, yeah, so I agree with him that all the scientists that want to view the samples should be able to view the samples, but I don't. This is still 5 years ago, so like the Artemis missions and Gateway were literally just killed and the Mars sample return mission was just killed in the currently proposed budget, which maybe won't get passed. I don't know, but I mean, he's probably popping champagne right now because Mars sample return mission Gateway and Artemis was just canceled. So maybe he's fine with that because now SpaceX is going to take the reins on a lot of Mars-related stuff that NASA can't do because they just got gutted. I don't know why safety procedures and adding that extra level of safety and preventing contamination is a bad thing. Be more innovative. If you have problems to deal with, don't ignore the problems and be more innovative. You're an engineer, be innovative.
Yes, it is true that the discussion of this has been enhanced in volume since Musk started coming out, because you can believe or not about the city on Mars, but this guy clearly does intend to send people to Mars. And if he proceeds as he does, and I hope he does, then by 2024 or so, and Starship is flying,
as the Super Heavy booster is making its way back down to Earth,
we can see those grid fins doing some heavy.
It's 2025 and this hasn't happened, so.
Starship is flying, whoever's elected president then, if they want to ask, can I have humans to Mars by the end of my second term, the answer is going to be yes. Okay, and then it's going to be a real question. So so let's look at the logic here. Okay, there's 2 forms of arguments for the planetary protection program: back contamination, forward contamination. Okay, the back contamination argument is nonsensical. We get 500 kilograms of Martian samples landing on Earth every year. Okay, there's, in other words, billions of tons of Martian material has been delivered to Earth over time, and probably much more as you go backward in time, because the solar system has been depleted of materials as time has gone on. So if the Red Death could come from Mars, it already has. And for them to put strict quarantines on samples, NASA brings back a couple of kilograms of samples from Mars, is like having the customs people search everyone's cars coming into the country from Canada to see that they're not importing Canada geese. Okay, when meantime they're flying in all over the place.
All right, this argument is just, he's said this before. I've watched some of his other debates and interviews. He says the same exact thing. And I don't know why anyone's not stopping him on this. I don't know if he said it recently, but he's got to stop with this, because this line of logic does not fucking work. It's not like you just have some collision, like some asteroid hits Mars and then some rocks fly off into space and they always land on Earth. Maybe that's happened before, but for the most part, these rocks that get projected into space after a collision with an asteroid in Mars, they are in space for millions of years. As far as we know, when you're exposed to that amount of radiation for millions or hundreds of thousands of years, it's essentially sterile. There's nothing remaining on those asteroids anymore. They're sterile, they're dead. So this assumes that they just hit and then they're immediately there within like 6 months or 10 years or 100 or 1,000 years. But that's not how it works. That's not how orbital mechanics work.
I actually do sometimes go to these meetings where the Mars science community is assembled and talking about their various mission concepts and priorities and so on. And a trope that I've started to hear recently and didn't really hear before, except from the actual Planetary Protection Office beating their own drum, but from actual Mars scientists, is that the human Mars mission should be delayed because it would interfere with our ability to know whether there was life on Mars before we got there. This is an argument that, not from all of them, but this, I'm starting to hear this trope being voiced. Now, this is a false argument, and I'll tell you why. Okay? If there is life on Mars and it is different at the biochemical level, doesn't use DNA and RNA and all that, then you know you didn't bring it. If there is life on Mars and it uses the same biochemistry as Earth, DNA, RNA, and all that, but the microbial forms you find are different than what we see here, despite 400 years of searches by people with microscopes, then you didn't bring it. But what if there are microbes on Mars and they are of the same species as we see on Earth? How would you know whether you brought it or not? It's simple. If you didn't bring it, then by definition, it was there in the past. And if it was there in the past, it will have left fossils or other biomarkers. Okay, that is a conclusive argument unless you're one of these people who believe that God created the planets with the fossils in them. Okay, creationism. Okay, that's what that argument amounts to. It's nothing but creationism, that you could find fossils on another planet and not know that life was there in the past. Okay, so this is a false argument.
Okay, so with this one, there's a lot. There's a lot here. If you didn't bring it, then by definition, it was in the past. Okay, so you want to get rid of the agency that is responsible for determining what is on your spacecraft in terms of its bioburden. So if you get rid of that agency, you don't know what's on your spacecraft to begin with. So you don't know if what you're analyzing on Mars is from your spacecraft because you got rid of the agency that is used to determine that. So you kind of just shot yourself in the foot with that one. And he mentions like microbes leaving fossils and biomarkers. I don't think he understands how incredibly rare it is to find fossils of microbes, let alone microbes that may have been extinct for over 1 billion years. Like, the odds of you finding biosignatures or biomarkers of microbes in Martian conditions, if they haven't been there for a long time, is so rare.
Now, look, what planet do we know the most about? The Earth. Why? Because we are here. We would know much less about the Earth if we weren't here. Okay? We will know much more about Mars when we are there on the surface, when you can have geologists and microbiologists and paleontologists walking around on the surface with their rock hammers, going directly to the materials, doing their thing as they do it here, setting up drilling equipment to drill down into the subsurface to try to find subsurface liquid water, bring up samples to see if there are microbes there. And that's how we're going to learn the most about Mars. So planetary protection is science prevention. And it's absolutely settlement prevention.
I wouldn't say it's prevention. I wouldn't say it's science prevention either. Maybe science delay and maybe settlement delay. But as that we know right now, there is not a Earth-ending catastrophe right on the horizon. I guess you could consider climate change something of that magnitude, but that is something that we can control if we really want to. The argument for having scientists on the surface, we don't have protocols for that. We don't understand how the human body works in that environment, let alone how our microbiome is going to interact with the Martian environment. There's so much we don't know. There's so much we don't know. Yeah, it's going to delay your settlement. It's going to delay you making rash, potentially devastating decisions for science. It's not science delay, you're preserving the science. You don't have to, we're not children. Most scientists understand that there is going to be stuff that is done outside of their lifetime that they would love to do. I mean, I would love to study the potential life on Mars and be there with the life on Mars, but I don't want to do that because it's dangerous.
And then finally, the last comment I would make is this, is the terminology we're using is all wrong. That it is contamination of Mars to bring life there. Bringing life somewhere is a constructive act. It is not a destructive act. Okay? The idea that we shouldn't destroy planetary bodies, okay, is making a desert bloom destroying the desert? Well, in one sense it is, but you're also creating something more valuable than a desert.
This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. If you're going there and you're colonizing it and you accidentally destroy life, you're destroying a potential second development of life. I can't think of much more valuable than that.
A living Mars is more valuable than a desert Mars. If someone was to propose that we take the Earth as it is with our rainforests and evergreen forests and meadows and coral reefs and chipmunks and flying fish and cities and universities and used bookstores and get rid of all that and replace it with a desert-like Mars with no life on it but maybe a few microbes in the groundwater, you would say, you're crazy. Okay, that would be a crime against humanity, a crime against the community of life, a crime against everything.
I love these straw men, like these just random out of the network people that say, let's destroy humanity. Like, is this an argument? This doesn't support your position because no one's saying that to begin with. And that's not even the situation we're in. How can you make that argument if that is not what we are involved in right now? That is not the same.
Well, if that is a crime, then undoing that, taking a place that's like Mars and turning it potentially into that, or anything remotely approaching that, would be a huge act of construction, an environmental miracle.
I bet this is exactly the same argument that colonists do. They just go to a foreign country and completely devastate it under the sense that they are making it better. But they're not. And we wouldn't be doing that. We would make it better for ourselves, but not the potential life that is there. And I know and I understand that I am making this life to seem like it is human. And I know for a lot of people, you're not going to give the same value of a human to a microbe. The point is, we're not deciding between the life of a person and the life of a microbe. We're deciding so much more than that. We are deciding on the future of humanity. We are deciding on how we define our legacy as an interplanetary species. We are deciding that we could become the aliens in our horror genre because we have aliens that come and colonize our world and kill everything on Earth. I don't want to use like the slippery slope thing, but it sort of kind of is, because we have to define these precedents now. We have to say that if there is any sort of life, we have to treat it with incredible respect when we are going to these planets. Because if we define the groundwork now, we avoid catastrophe in the future, thousands of years from now, if we are fortunate to get to that point.
Unless you're of the school of thought that says whatever humans do is wrong by definition, okay? Unless you're seeking evidence for a thesis that humans are a criminal species in anything we do, whether, if we make it warmer, it's worse. If we make it colder, it's worse. It doesn't matter. If we leave it alone, it's worse.
It's just stupid, too. Because, you're just straw manning. You're just making up these random people. Just because, he'd probably consider someone like me as someone that sees humanity as such looks at all the bad stuff that we do, but you can't just ignore the bad stuff we do and say that the thing that you are doing is better than what other humans have done. You're going to be a colonizer, so you're kind of mimicking the other colonizers. You're going to have more money and better technology when you're doing it, but you haven't learned from the mistakes of the other colonizers. You got to be more careful. That's the only thing. Humanity's great, but humanity can suck. And the thing that defines humanity is our ability to overcome our biological evolutionary programming. That's essentially our biggest difference, is that we can acknowledge the things that drive us and be like, okay, this is good for our continuation as a species, but it can be really bad for other species. And we got to be careful.
We're here in Washington, D.C., North America. Humans did not evolve in North America. We are an invasive species. All animals are evasive species that have any range of any consequence whatsoever, because they all moved somewhere from wherever they originated. Okay, should we exterminate the North American mustangs because they are an invasive species? Should we exterminate, well, practically all animals everywhere, because almost everywhere where they are is not where they originated? Okay, what animals do, one of their most noteworthy characteristics, is they move. Okay, and and that's a good thing. I like it. Okay, and exerting our freedom as animals and as the vanguard of the community of life,
Guys, come
on Earth, to enable it to spread to new worlds. Okay, this is not a crime. This is humanity fulfilling its duty to all these other life forms that have lived and died out here to support us, so they could, a species here could be evolved that could have the capability of giving them a new world that they can inhabit.
Humanity filling its duty. It's literally, guys, it's literally manifest destiny. I mean, I'm an American. I grew up in American schools. We learned all about manifest destiny, and we learned all about how it was misplacing the Native American communities, and we just destroyed their civilization. We destroyed it. And I know maybe I'm relating microbes a little bit to humanity again, but we're setting precedents here. And this is not manifest destiny. Stop saying that. Stop saying that it is our goal. We are supposed to overcome our biological programming. We can't just take everything and destroy it immediately. We can be careful. We can be careful with these things. We can colonize Mars, but we gotta do carefully. So carefully. If we go to Mars and we find life, it would be among the most important discoveries in human history. I think that goes without saying. I think most people can agree on that. I hope I'm not doing what Zubrin does and just make up these people, but I personally think it would be one of the most important events in human history. But in our exploration, if we destroy that life, even by accident, that's our legacy. That's who we will be. We won't be defined as explorers. We'll just be conquerors. The same people that Zubrin seems to really admire. So if you're still here, thank you for staying with me, and I hope I gave you something to think about.